Now, for those of you that don't know, we, or if this is the first time here, we do have a back catalogue of discussion series. Most of them have been demo based and technical, but I'm really pleased today that we've got something a little bit different for you, which is focused on the education sector, and we've got some guests along to discuss their experiences with AVD. So we'll come to that in a second. Just a couple of reminders: we do like to record these sessions, right, so that we can put them on the website afterwards and share them with a wider audience. It is a discussion format, so please chip in whenever you like, and you've got a question or you've got an observation. If you're a little shy, the chat is there, right? So it pops it in there, and we'll address the questions as we go. We've got lots of people on hand that can help answer any sort of technical questions as well that might come up. And of course, we'll send out the video and content and things afterwards, right? So make sure that you're all ready. Today, I'm very pleased to, as I said, we have a panel of speakers to talk about AVD in education. I've got, well, actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Dave, would you like to go first? Right.
Well, thanks. Hey guys, great to meet you all. It's Dave Weimer here. I'm part of the Microsoft Global Black Belt team, looking after AVD as a primary workload, working with customers and partners like CubeSys to adopt the technology, tackling it both from a technical and business standpoint. So got the best of both worlds, and great to meet you all.
Thanks, Dave, for coming along. And Dave just isn't a black belt in AVD for Microsoft. I've known Dave for many years and has got a wealth of experience in VDI and this type of infrastructure from roles in the past, right, Dave? So you've been around for a long time in this sector.
Certainly have.
Cool. And then Michelle, lovely to have you along. Thank you for agreeing to join us and discuss. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Lever, Senior Manager of Client Technologies at TAFE New South Wales. My team looks after all our platforms that manage our end user devices, so the SCCMs, Endpoint Manager, Intune, platforms to manage mobile phones and Mac devices, as well as our large virtual desktop environment.
Excellent, Michelle. Thank you for coming along today. And then we've got George from the CubeSys team. George, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, George Zajakovsky, one of the senior cloud consultants here at CubeSys. So my background has been end user compute, virtual desktop technologies, and cloud computing over the past, I guess, 10 years or so. Very strong background in Azure Virtual Desktop, VMware Horizon, Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, you name it, any sort of VDI solution. I can help you onboard any of that if you like. That's me.
Awesome. Thanks, George. George has a wealth of experience, you could hear there, and has been involved in, I think we've got somewhere near 50 projects we've delivered on AVD and CubeSys, and George has been involved in a large majority of those, right? So a wealth of experience. So do ask questions as we go along. And myself, I'm co-founder, one of the co-founders at CubeSys. I've been in IT for well over 25 years now, and can track my history with end user compute all the way back to NT4, and I think it was MetaFrame 1.8 way back then. So I've been involved in this sector and done all sorts of roles involving project management and delivery and management of infrastructure in that space, right? And I've been really enjoying what I've seen in the VDI space since the cloud has come along, right? So a lot of the challenges I think we've seen in VDI along the way, which we'll discuss as we go forward, are really being addressed in new and novel ways with the adoption of cloud. And I think Azure Virtual Desktop is the best example of that available to us all. But what we thought we'd do as we're talking about education, we just pulled up a couple of bullet points on the sector, right, and some things that are happening, and sort of general things happening in education. They help just to set the scene a little bit before we dive into AVD. Our friends at Gartner there, obviously, even the K-12 area is changing significantly. We're seeing IT impact that part of the education sector with the use of analytics being more prevalent, use of systems in the classroom, right? And that's really driving some changes in how the school supports IT, right? And needs to support that, and lots more outsourced and support from third parties like ourselves, right, to help those IT systems work well inside of the education sector, right? So a lot of change happening in education. True also of higher education, right, which we'll probably focus on a bit more today. If you want to just move to the next slide for me, George. Thanks. Some of the stats there again from our friends at Gartner, right? Interesting that malware is something that's still very prevalent in the education sector, and that's something we need to consider, like the security around these systems and how we maintain them. But probably not surprisingly is the amount of growth we're seeing in that online tutoring, right? Huge growth in that sector and predicted to continue well past 2025. And how's that impacting them in that sort of what we're seeing those trends in the sort of systems of market? Well, there's challenges with enrollment of users and how we're managing their credentials, which we might come to a little bit later on. And also that classroom technology. I think what we'll hear is the ability to be able to spin up classrooms in a consistent manner quickly and effectively is going to be key moving forward in higher education. And then back to that security angle again, right? Moving towards zero trust security and making sure that we've got a real handle on the data and how the users interact with that is going to be key as well. Right. And then I think we've got last comment from just around that and moving towards AVD from Satya, right? So some interesting stats there that we pulled out from the Microsoft CEO, right? So the whole experience with Azure Virtual Desktop is vastly different to what we've done in VDI before and what we've done on-prem. We've really got much closer to that full experience of like having a laptop in front of you, that standard sort of compute for an SOE or a classroom situation, right? So we can really mirror that very carefully. And we're also removed a lot of the barriers or constraints that we've had with VDI traditionally around, you know, the backend infrastructure, the storage performance, the log-on storms in the morning. We've got techniques we can really use to address that in cloud, and it's really exciting to see that we can take on new workloads. I know we did work with the University of Queensland to help move their engineering faculty into AVD, and that was like unheard of for me. I mean, you don't put engineering apps onto VDI because it's just too hard to manage, especially in multi-session. But we're able to do that because we've got GPU-based compute in the back, and we could expand and contract that amount of workload and compute that we gave them. Right? And we had a very successful solution that allowed Queensland Uni's engineering faculty to put AutoCAD and SolidWorks and workloads like that onto the platform, which was fantastic. But you can see there from Satya a lot of growth in that area, and it's not really surprising when you think about those factors. Cool. I might just hand over to George as we sort of set in the scene a little bit and just talk a little bit about the technology, George, that we're moving from and where we're moving to, and then we'll get into some discussions with Michelle and Dave around the education sector in particular and how TAFE started that journey. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we're all familiar with this slide here, right? So traditionally, what we used to do on-prem was we would have, large data centers scattered across the state. We would have a whole bunch of physical hosts. On top of that physical host, we'd have storage, networking, I guess you could say dark fiber links from different sites, power, cooling, heating, all of this stuff that we sort of generally had to go and manage and maintain to get sort of a lot of VDI workloads out there, right? So easily everyone's had something like this, and everybody's trying to move away from this because there's just too much expenditure, right? We go out, we buy servers, they're only good for X amount of years before we have to go out and then buy other ones. It's just really complex, I guess, in terms of who manages what. You've got different teams that look after the actual data center. You've got different teams that go out there and actually look after the VMs that run on the physical host there and all that kind of stuff. So I guess everybody's trying to move to this really simplistic, thinking of Azure Virtual Desktop and Azure in general. Everyone's trying to migrate to the cloud where they've got a single pane of glass where they can go in and manage this stuff from an end user perspective in a way. Like we are the end users of that platform that go ahead and then, spin VMs off and then be able to give that to our users or students or whatever the case is, right? But I think this is where we're trying to move away from because it is so cumbersome. And I know for a fact, when we look at education departments, Paul mentioned University of Queensland. So they've gone ahead and moved from on-prem to this solution here. They've got their own reasoning behind that. It might be because they want to move away from this model, or they're looking to move and save costs by moving to a consumption-based model. But for TAFE,
I know that TAFE had a pretty cumbersome on-prem solution like this, and obviously we've got Michelle here. So, Michelle, from your perspective, I mean, why did TAFE sort of move from your on-prem solution? I think you guys were running VMware Horizon Cloud, VMware Horizon on-prem, and then you were possibly looking to go towards VMware Horizon Cloud, Azure Virtual Desktop, Citrix. Why did you guys sort of move to a cloud solution from on-prem?
So yeah, just looking at that diagram, I guess it highlights some of the complexities in that. So we had infrastructure at every campus to try and make the user experiences as best as possible. Local resources, local connectivity, not relying on a WAN that can sometimes be bandwidth, high utilization, impacting on performance. So we had data centers at pretty much every campus with this sort of infrastructure in place. And as George pointed out, in a large organization, you have different areas responsible for different parts of that infrastructure. So network team trying to do what the network team needs to do, upgrading firmware on switches, swapping out hardware. Same with the server team needing to do ESX upgrades, firmware upgrades, whatever else they needed to maintain their fleet, and trying to align that and keep that all in sync with whatever application you're running at the application layer. In this instance, VMware Horizon can be quite a challenge. Obviously, for those of us that have done it, you know that you can't just go willy-nilly upgrading this, that, and the other without checking to make sure there's no impacts to your application layer. Yeah. So a lot of challenges there that we no longer have to worry about with this now residing in AVD. That's all looked after by our friends in Microsoft.
Yeah, awesome. I think as well, Michelle, the other thing, right? I mean, when you go out, in this example here, you've got sort of 2 ESX hosts. When we buy hardware, right, we want to utilize all of that. We're paying for 2 hosts. We want to go ahead and use it. So like you just said, when there is downtime to be made, you need to bring one of those hosts down, and that will essentially, cripple, I guess, 50% of your workload.
Yeah, definitely.
During that outage. Yeah. So now that we've gone and moved to Azure, we don't have to worry about any of that anymore. I mean, Microsoft have got thousands of hosts, right? They can go and do all the, calculations to move users around, whatever. And we, as the, I guess, again, end users, right, of that product, we don't really care where it is as long as it's uptime, it's running, there's no faults, that kind of stuff. So this is what we're generally seeing for a lot of our customers, where we're seeing that they want to move from that on-prem solution towards, some sort of virtual desktop computing platform. I just want to cover a couple of different, I guess, vendors that integrate with AVD. So we've got sort of 3 of the big players here. You've got Nerdio, Citrix, VMware. I'll probably start from right to left. So VMware themselves have, in the past, had VMware Horizon on-prem, and over the years, they're starting to see people are moving away from on-prem over to cloud. So then they've gone ahead and introduced VMware Horizon on Azure, right? And that's where you get that integration between sort of your look and feel familiar VMware Horizon portal with the ability to then go ahead and deploy Windows 10 multi-session desktops inside your environment, right? So you go ahead and deploy a server farm, and push out an RDSH server farm by running a Windows 10 desktop. So that's where they're sort of moving. And I just hit the wrong button. There we go. With Citrix, same thing. Citrix Cloud has come a long way. Again, you've got the same thing there, right? So you've got connectors that basically talk to Azure, and with that, we're able to utilize and leverage Windows 10 or Windows 11 virtual machines inside our Citrix environments via those connectors via Horizon Cloud. So everybody's sort of moving towards this route here. That Citrix and VMware are always sort of on-prem guys. Nerdio, on the other hand, have basically come on board 100% cloud, or I guess cloud in a way that it's deployed in your own subscription. And Nerdio have come along and basically seen what VMware do, what Citrix do, what Microsoft do natively, and then basically gone and put their product on steroids, where it basically goes through and it does a whole heap of automation that Microsoft have missed out, a whole heap of stuff that VMware and Citrix haven't thought about. It adds additional automation, management, monitoring metrics, all of this other sort of technology to integrate with AVD. And their focus is really around Azure Virtual Desktop. So when we see our customers move from on-prem into, I guess, the cloud world, you have to have something managing it, right? And depending on contracts and sort of where your business is around that. But I guess in TAFE's terms or TAFE's point, they've gone ahead and leveraged Nerdio over Citrix and VMware. So I guess, sorry to pick on you, Michelle, but again, using TAFE an example, you guys have obviously moved from your on-prem environment over into AVD, and you've gone ahead and looked at Nerdio to, I guess, manage and maintain that entire Azure Virtual Desktop infrastructure that you push, not only for your staff, but we're talking students here, right? So how or why did you guys sort of look at using Nerdio over some of the other big player competitors?
Thanks, George. So back when we made the decision to go down the AVD path, it was part of our COVID response plan. Obviously, we had a requirement there, campuses closed, people not allowed on site. For the business to continue to function, we needed students to be able to continue their study at home and access some of the software that they wouldn't typically have access to on their own devices. And the same for our staff, not just the software, but access to some of our systems that weren't available off-site. So we made a decision to embrace AVD. Probably the main reasons were, at that point in time, we did have Citrix on-prem and we did have VMware Horizon on-prem, but both obviously limited to the infrastructure that we had in place in our data centers and how much we could scale out with those solutions. So we weren't sure what the demand would be. So for us, it was a no-brainer to look at AVD because the scalability was there. We also had Microsoft on hand to help us with the implementation. Nerdio, we chose, it was advised by one of the Microsoft engineers that we were working with to do an evaluation of the product. And once we put that in place, it made everything extremely seamless. We got everything up and running. I think from the time we activated the subscription to being able to use our first host pool was 2 weeks. And I would attribute that to a certain extent to the fact that we were using Nerdio to manage it. We did look at whether we could do it with Citrix and VMware, and it was possible. But at the time, both of those products were obviously focused on their solutions. They hadn't matured enough to be able to manage AVD in the way that Nerdio was released. Nerdio was specifically for managing AVD, designed for it and leveraged a lot of the functionality that was available in AVD, whereas Citrix and VMware, while they have matured over time, at that point in time, they didn't have the capabilities that we were leveraging in Nerdio.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think as well, I mean, we had a conversation offline, a week ago where you basically mentioned, you did a course around mastering, AVD, and some of the things during that course is, how to create storage accounts, how to set up FS Logix profiles, all that kind of stuff. And, what was your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I didn't realize until I did that workshop with Microsoft, they had a lab at the end of it where you could go in and follow a set of exercises to set up a host pool and turn on some functionality and specifically around FS Logix profiles. I had no idea until that point in time the effort that was required to do that natively in AVD without Nerdio. So that's when I realized just how spoiled we'd been by embracing Nerdio very early on in our AVD implementation. So really has saved the team a lot of overhead in the management aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. Look, we use it for a lot of our managed service customers as well, and certainly with all of the automation and integration that it's got, it just makes things really easy. So it's awesome to see that. But obviously each of the three big players there have got their pros and cons around all of that. Obviously, if you're a Citrix shop or you're a VMware shop, you probably have some sort of agreement, you want to go down that route, etc. But I mean, we're seeing a lot of people move to Nerdio because it just bang for buck. It beats all the others, I guess.
I think Michelle, did the flexibility of Nerdio's commercial arrangement also help in that decision as you were quickly adopting that. So we've seen that with a bunch of our clients, right? So no lock-in contracts and sort of being able to flex with your needs, which is not always possible with the bigger players, right? So the more established ones, yeah.
That was definitely part of our initial decision. We I think we had a 90-day trial, and then at the end of it, it was subscription based, so we could pull out at any time if we, if Citrix and VMware had matured to the point where we felt it was time to move over to them, we could have made that switch seamlessly without, breaking a contract or having to pay it out. So
that's been a big factor with a lot of our clients, and I must admit, it makes me and my team feel comfortable selling Nerdio because, or promoting Nerdio, because it really is. If it doesn't add value, then you take it out, and it doesn't impact your AVD environment, so it doesn't hurt anything technically, but it just adds value, right? So if it's adding value and it's cost effective, use it. And To date, I think about 90-95% of our AVD clients use Nerdio because of that reason, which is great. And it's great to see a company embracing that new sort of modern approach to consumption-based and flexibility that we expect to get from cloud, right? And it's great to see the software company that actually adheres to that as well, which is good. I might just bring Dave in quickly on that and sort of expand that. Dave, obviously through that, Michelle's talking about how quickly the AVD was adopted during that COVID response era, and we saw that with a lot of our clients as well. Did you see that in the education sector elsewhere, or more globally? You would have had a picture of that probably a bit broader than any of us here.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I mean, the COVID pandemic really put a lot of pressure on Microsoft in the back end. We needed to be able to deliver that service in a relatively quick period of time. So, you know, what was traditionally taking us 6, 8, 9 months type of projects, we're actually delivering them in 2 to 3 weeks. You know, seeing mass deployments as people were being sent home, just in the education sector, but you know, in general, we've seen people being sent home. Work from home type policies were coming into play, and the beauty about the AVD solution, it's all on demand, right? So there's no infrastructure you need to stand up. Once you've got your tenant there, you can scale from one user to 10,000 users with you know, a relatively short run rate there. So you know, and that coupled with the power of Nerdio just made life so much easier for all of our customers. They were able to continue functioning and deliver that VDI experience in unheard of short period of time. It was really good.
I want to pick up on a question and I'll ask Dave you first, and then Michelle. There was a comment earlier about the seasonality of education and the sector. Right? We see that in some other sectors, but in education, it's really quite prevalent, right? So the students disappear for 2 to 3 months, right, in a spell, and there's the holiday breaks and all that sort of stuff. And I know our education clients are really starting to leverage that ability of AVD to come down and reduce all those consumption costs in the cloud and minimize the overhead, right? So low management, because we're just reducing the amount of people there, and then spin it back up again in time for the semester starting. So David, is that something that's been top of mind for people in the education sector when you're working with them?
Absolutely. I spent a lot of time in the university space doing some modelling and predicted costings for those types of customers, and you hit the nail on the head, right? Especially in the university space, you see the 2 weeks leading up to orientation week or O week, massive spike in usage, where all the students are on campus, they're getting all excited. They do O week and then it drops off to near nothing. They're just business as usual, small number of users, concurrent connections, and then it spikes again a week or two before exam week. Okay, so when the exams, end of semester, exams are coming up, then the resources are being utilised to their capacity, right? The differences there are, what we've done historically is we've built on-premise environments to cater for that, probably 4 weeks or 5 weeks of the year where we've got, 90 to 100% capacity. It's wasted funds, wasted infrastructure. What we're doing with AVD is still delivering that capacity, but on a demand type burstability scenario. So use what you need when you need it, and switch the rest off when it's not being used. So that dynamic approach is, one, saving pain from management layer, but two, it's also saving huge amounts of cost.
Yeah. Is that a factor for you as well, Michelle? Are you seeing that as you mature into your use of AVD? And got some other stories I know coming about how you after the pandemic you've used it more, but that seasonal up and down thing, that's certainly a factor that's good for you as well?
That was definitely a factor. So once we settled into BAU with AVD, we saw an opportunity to move some of our other workloads into that environment for that very reason. We had a large Citrix infrastructure in our centralized data center, GovDC. It was consuming about 40% of the resources in that environment. And obviously that needed to be allocated to us permanently. So it didn't matter whether there was load there or not. We couldn't release it because it was a risk that we wouldn't get it back when we needed it. So moving that workload into AVD, being very seasonal, it's typically heavy load at the start of the year, probably middle of the year, and then end of the year when we're doing enrollments and when we're finalising end of year enrollments and exam marking.
Yeah.
So putting that into AVD, that was a no-brainer as well. We released 40% of the resources in the data center, and that allowed other projects to continue without having to go through capital expenditure processes to add more resources in the data center. But we also looked at our on-prem Horizon infrastructure as well, where we had servers at every campus, and they 100% again allocated to that specific purpose, where during the holidays not being used at all.
Wow, that's a huge capex expense just sat there doing nothing, right? That's
100%.
From a business perspective. If you talk to a CFO about that, they'd be, having nightmares, right? So you're able to sort of reassure them now with AVD that when we are spending money, we're spending it when we need it and how we need it, and it's not wasted, right?
And we avoided having to go through that process. We had a bunch of infrastructure on the campus due to expire warranty, so moving that into AVD just simplified the whole thing. We were able to turn it all off and shut down some of the data centers where that was the only service that was still running on-prem.
When you think about the operational savings there from the team and the effort and the sort of heartache of looking after that on-prem infrastructure, that must be a huge burden that's removed from you. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Closing down some of the data centers where you've got the power consumption, you've got air conditioning, you've got UPS, you've got all of the things that you need in there to support a data center. Taking that all out and shutting it down, significant savings there. Moving that into the cloud and not having to worry about that anymore.
Awesome. I've got a bit of a loaded question for you because I think I know the answer, right? But tell me about the burden then of all this automation to look after AVD when you're going up and down and different workloads. You've got log-on storms in the morning. You've got peak times and lower times. What's the burden on the IT team to manage all that?
Yeah, Nerdio has really simplified that for us, and I think that was one of the decision points early on was the Citrix and the VMware solutions. I don't think their scalability options had matured very much, whereas Nerdio's were fully matured and we were able to take advantage of automation in scaling up to meet demand and scaling down. They've also matured their product to where we can now scale up from storage perspective as well. That wasn't available early on, but that's now there. We initially, when we overspec'd our storage to cater for that initial log-on storm where all the user profiles needed to be created. But once we got over that, we were able to scale that storage back down, and we haven't had any issues with that since then.
Yeah, it is a nice, I think a bit unique in Nerdio, that storage automation piece. I love the fact that we can turn off VMs and remove this expense of an SSD, an expensive piece of disk, and then and put it to the standard spinning disk and just leave it there until we need it, and then turn it back on again, and it automatically moves back to premium disk and get the performance that we need for the users, right? And all those little tweaks just saving dollars and cents as you
and
go
all fully automated.
Yeah, all fully out. So and that was my loaded question, was like, what's the impact on your team to deal with that? And the fact is, you set it up and then you sit back and watch it, don't you?
Yeah.
You just check it. And I know that from my team and the experiences that we had quite a few clients that I remember a government department in South Australia that snap locked down for a week, and they had AVD in place, we had our automation in place, and we basically sat back and watched their environment go from a few hundred users normal most days to like I think nearly 1,000 users for that week, and then back down to a couple of hundred, and the automation just took care of it, right? So the overhead for an IT team was very minimal. Right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens with our corporate application, where the usage is quite seasonal. Turn on a certain number of servers in the morning to cater with the load first thing in the morning, and then it just scales up throughout the day as it needs to, and then scales back down at the end of the day when people start to log off.
Yeah, that's awesome, right? And also, you think of the impact of freeing up all those IT resources to go and do other work, because we're not doing that maintenance and managing. So, and the maintenance and managing that is like down to what, monthly patching and changing applications and things. So they're things that are a bit more, they have a bit more of an impact on your user base, rather than the positive interactions you do with the platform, rather than that sort of maintenance piece. That's
probably the other side of it too. We can schedule the updates to happen overnight. So if we do update a master image and we want to redeploy it, we just schedule it to happen overnight, and the capability of Nerdio to not impact any of the hosts that are already on and being used by end users. It just makes it really seamless for doing maintenance.
So just to recap there a bit, Michelle, like you had a need during that COVID period, like everybody, the VPN solution probably didn't cater for the sort of volume that you needed. There was applications that you needed to get out to people that weren't on campus, and wow. And so you reacted quickly and you got AVD up and running. But since then, of that last year or so, you've really like moved. Sounds like you've moved everything towards AVD, right? You got that single solution. So Citrix has been deprecated, and VMware on site has been deprecated, and now you've got a single platform. That must have huge benefits for you as well.
Definitely. I think anyone can appreciate not having to manage 3 separate solutions that are providing the same benefits. So really good that the team now only has to manage and maintain that one solution, and all of the flow on benefits from it being in the cloud really has minimized the effort from the team, and obviously the effort from the other teams as well, who were supporting the services to allow us to run our virtual desktop infrastructure on-prem.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome story. Thanks for sharing that. George, might just jump back to you. I think you had a couple more slides just to sort of round out some of the sort of technical benefits, right? And then
Look, before we jump onto the next one, I probably have a question again for Dave, right? We've been talking about some of the cool stuff that, Nerdio has been doing in terms of, making the solution a lot easier. But what's sort of on the roadmap from Microsoft's perspective around, AVD, or what's coming to AVD soon? Do you have any sort of insight around that and how that might help some people that are looking to make a decision to move towards it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had some big feature releases of late. Obviously Windows 11 was a big one for us. We've got Azure AD joined VMs, which is really exciting. We've got some key features around monitoring, insight monitoring. We've got some interesting advancements coming around the MSI app attach integration into the Azure portal, which is really good. We've actually moved. One of the biggest problems, or one of the biggest challenges that we've seen from local customers is the metadata was in the States. That's actually coming to Australia now. So the Azure AVD metadata will be locally housed in Australia East, which is really good. We've got some enhancements around multimedia redirection on the Windows endpoints, which will really enhance that video conferencing and calling capability. We've got updated integration into Teams, and some optimizations around running Teams calls from the VDI workload. So yeah, lots and lots happening, and all those sort of topics will be either dropped in the last couple of weeks, or will be dropping in the next couple of months.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's good. That's really awesome. There's always sort of changes and advancements that Microsoft's putting into that, which is great. Actually, one thing that just came to mind was the whole metadata stuff, right? A lot of people, especially in Australia, were forced to use metadata locations in Australia East or somewhere else. And I think it's as of version 4.5, Nerdio have released a metadata sort of cloning feature where you can easily grab those resources and bring them in-house into one of the regions. So if you have any sort of data sovereignty or anything like that you need to have all of your data 100% in Australia, you can now leverage that to pull those locations in-house locally, which is great. So yeah, awesome. Just moving on. So look, this slide here is really simple around, I guess, what were some of the Azure Virtual Desktop benefits back then? But I just want to mention this because this is some of the key reasons why people came and looked at AVD and went, okay, we want to go from on-prem into AVD. So AVD was always the first place, and still today, the only place that you can get Windows 10 or Windows 11 multi-session environment, right? You can't get that anywhere else. You're technically not licensed for it. It's the only service where it basically allows you to virtualize both apps and desktops without having to worry about any infrastructure costs, right? So we would literally just get a virtual machine, build it as needed as a gold image, and then push that out to whatever AD groups we want, and that's pretty much our job done, right? All of the gateway monitoring metrics, all of that stuff we didn't have to worry about. So we didn't need to have to spin up additional resources on-prem or in the cloud to go out and do that. So Microsoft took care of that for us. Some of the other stuff now, this is probably no longer valid come next year because Windows 7 extended security updates are end of life. I think it's January 23rd, 2023 from memory. But long story short, you rewind 2 years ago, right? And we had people that were out there that were running a lot of Windows 7 application or desktops that were hosting certain applications. And with Windows 7 end of life, Microsoft went, okay, you know what? If anybody still needs to use this, we're happy to push out the additional security updates, but you have to come to Azure Virtual Desktop. We'll give you that free support until next in a month's time. So unfortunately, we're sort of at the last end of that ladder, but that's what one of them was. And then the last one there was the integrated security with M365. You sort of got all of the additional bells and whistles that Azure's got to offer. So Azure Firewall, Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Security Advisor, Defender, all of that stuff. Anything that you can sort of deploy in Azure has sort of come into play around AVD. So that's a lot of the excuse me. That's a lot of the sort of the reasons why people were sort of looking at AVD to move down that route. This slide here talks a little bit just between the Azure Virtual Desktop side of things and Windows 365. Now, as a sort of education organization, Azure Virtual Desktop will probably be your best bet because it gives you the flexibility around doing multi-session support, Windows remote application streaming, GPU support. So if you want to run some workloads around, I guess, AutoCAD, Visual Studio, anything that basically requires, a graphics card, Azure Virtual Desktop does support that. But, if you had something around the Windows 365 route and you just wanted to push a desktop and not be anything fancy, you'd be able to just, set a desktop, get the job done out for our contractors. Maybe we have some students that need like a sandbox mode where they can go in there and do whatever they need to do. But we want to give them the ability to then go ahead and snapshot and restore their own virtual machine. We can go and do that route right now with Windows 365. So we can offload some of those management tasks to our end users or our students and have them sort of use it as a sandbox mode and then revert it back whenever needed. So that's awesome there. And then if you just look down the bottom there, third party support, sort of second last option there, third last, Nerdio supports Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. So if you're already leveraging Nerdio in your AVD environment today and you're looking at going down the route to Windows 365, because you might find that the personal desktop costs, at this very point in time is cheaper to do it via Windows 365, well then go ahead, integrate that in. You can still run all your scripted actions and things like that from Nerdio to your Windows 365 machine. So which is really awesome. So yeah, just a really quick side-by-side comparison there. I mean, but at the end of the day, these are both cloud solutions. We've had customers that have chosen one over the other for specific use cases, and that's fine. But what we're generally seeing in the education space is Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop sort of go hand in hand, depending on what you want to sort of push out.
I do have a couple more questions for Michelle and David as we aim to sort of get the last 5-10 minutes, guys. I was interested in Michelle, so when we're usually doing projects and having been an infrastructure manager myself for many years, we need to put a business case together. You need to cost it. You need to put like buy equipment and how much it costs to implement it. So you'd have that whole sort of project costs, right? And working out all the CapEx versus the OpEx and things. How did that go with AVD? I'm going to imagine it's significantly different, right? And in that you were not having to build that whole business case in that level of detail, right?
Yeah, no, that's correct. I guess initially being part of our COVID response, that was a rapid provisioning process, and some of those requirements we didn't need to meet. But moving on and expanding the service, it certainly has saved us a lot of time and effort in what you would normally need to do to secure the capital expenditure you need to put in the infrastructure to support something like this. I mean, we now have up to, I think, 5,000 concurrent users a day in our AVD environment. So to support that on-prem, that would have been a significant amount of expenditure that we would have had to have.
And then to get the sign-offs and the approvals and things along the way would have been high. And what you've been able to do then, I suppose, is use that automation, elasticity of cloud, just to adopt more solutions as you went along without having that big project sort of underpinning it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Being able to turn it on and off as needed is just the biggest benefit for us. And going back to George's side with the Microsoft Cloud PCs, we did look at those as well, but we found that the scalability with AVD, being able to turn it on when we need it and turn it off when we don't, actually results in better cost savings for us from a per user subscription model.
I think, as George mentioned, education sector, I think it has a big benefit, particularly when we look at that seasonality stuff that we talked about before. Right. I'm focusing on education. I imagine you've got lots of labs, or you've got like you need to have that PC in a particular state with particular applications on, and it's a good known state. The last thing a teacher wants to do is come into a classroom and then have to be fixing IT problems, right? Because it isn't how it should be, right? So talk to me about how AVD's maybe impacted that area of your service, right? And how you're moving more strategically towards particular workloads using AVD.
So some of the benefits in the classroom, I think if you're talking from a maintenance perspective, obviously if we're doing updates to our master image every month, they're getting essentially a fresh desktop.
Fresh PC, yeah.
Every month. So typically don't have the issues that you would see in a classroom where a device might not be rebuilt for 12 months and it's had multiple people using it, multiple applications deployed to it. Some of the benefits we've heard from the teaching sections themselves is first and most obvious was being able to access their software from home, being able to run those classes virtually, and their students being able to continue their studies when they weren't able to come on campus. But secondary to that was no longer being restricted to a specific room. So traditional classroom environment, you only have this software installed in this classroom, and if you need to run whatever class that needs that software, you need to book time into that classroom. So, or put through the request to IT and say, we need this software in this other room, and hope that it's spec'd sufficiently to be able to run this software. So this is really multi-purpose, our classrooms. From the perspective of as long as we've got a host pool with the software they need, they can go into any classroom and access it.
That must be a huge benefit from the old model. And facilities management and that just scheduling and all that type of stuff must have eased a lot of burden from the outside of the IT department, right out into the business and the teaching staff. That's awesome.
You know what? The same thing would have applied there for your libraries as well, right? I mean, if I was a student and I had to work on something and I came into a library, the ability of having like a thin client or something and then, selecting what I needed access to is just awesome. You're no longer tied to physical hardware. That's not the limiting factor anymore these days, which is awesome.
No, and you've touched on a good point there, George. In the libraries, we typically, in certain campuses where they do design courses and things that have high spec computer labs, libraries would sometimes have one or two high spec devices with that software loaded so that, students had somewhere to go after class to continue working on their assignments. That's no longer required now. We can replace those library devices with thin clients, and they can just access whatever software host pool they need to in AVD and not have to worry too much about the software on the desktop.
That's awesome. You know what? One thing as well that's I guess I probably should have mentioned it earlier, and we are all licensed to use, say, Outlook, Exchange. We've all got a OneDrive account, for example. Does TAFE use OneDrive at all to look at synchronizing data between your different host pools, if any? Do you use OneDrive at all today, or
not between host pools? We do use OneDrive, and using that quite successfully for people to. So we use FS Logic for our user profiles. Obviously, we want them maintained no matter what host they log on to within a host pool, but we have separate user profiles per host pool because different host pools will have different software, and we didn't want any conflicts with this software available in this host pool, not available in that one.
Yeah. Look, I was trying to sort of go down the route of, if you are using OneDrive, and it does sound like you are, but probably for different cases, etc. But I mean, you are licensed. You've probably got an E3, E5 license for your students. You are no doubt already licensed for AVD as well. So it's kind of really simplistic and an easy decision to say, you know what? I'm going to stop buying hardware on-prem. I'm already licensed for AVD. Let's just pay the cost of the consumption when the service is in use. And, happy days, we don't need to worry about any additional licensing or anything like that. So I think that was one of the really key advantages. A lot of education departments today are already licensed for AVD. And obviously it extends out into corporate businesses as well. But definitely, it's something that's there that you can go and leverage and use today and put it in trial, etc., because you can just sort of spin it up and remove it if needed, and scale it out as big as needed, right? So you've got all that flexibility, which is awesome.
Exactly, and that E3, E5 entitlement. When I'm doing business cases, the license is already there. But more importantly, when I'm looking at cost savings, it's all around if the customer's using published apps. The reduction in RDS terminal server cows, the server licenses. In some cases, we Microsoft charged the VDA license, so virtual desktop access license. All that disappears with the entitlement for AVD being in Win36 or M365. Sorry, so the business cases are really easy to stand up, and the justification is really palatable.
I think you're dead right, Dave, and bringing it up is so important, because I think probably George and myself are guilty, having done so much AVD over the last couple of years, that we sort of take those benefits for granted now, and you forget when people on prem, they've got, you're saying the server license, the RDS CALs, the Citrix licensing, or the VMware, and it just all stacks up, and all that gets super simplified, right? I can see Michelle nodding. Is that also the case for you, right?
Yeah, we had our virtual desktop licensing was required for our Horizon environment because we were running the ThinOS on the devices, so they didn't come with a Microsoft license. So obviously we needed to license those devices to be able to use Windows in a virtual environment. No longer needed that once we decommissioned that, and the same with Citrix. Obviously we needed the RDS licenses to be able to run that in that environment. So two things that we crossed off the list that we no longer have to worry about.
And probably some significant savings there, I would imagine.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yes, I thought there might be. Look, as always in our discussion series, we seem to be going over time. I just wanted to pause and see if there was any questions from the floor. I think somebody said the chat wasn't working, so apologies for that, guys. But if you want to come off mute or stick your hand up and say, ask any questions or comments, please do. And I'll give you a second to do that, and then I might just get some final comments from the panel. Anybody got anything in particular they'd like to ask? We're all shy today, are we? Well, maybe we've just answered all the questions, guys. Right, that's also possible.
Hey, I've actually got one thing that just sort of. Oh, hang on. There you go. AES has got a few. I was just saying that. So I was just thinking that. So, Michelle, does AVD? Probably a question to Dave as well, right? Because we've sort of moved all of our workloads to the cloud, essentially, right? And we've got these massive internet connections from those data centers to be able to, host resources for anyone around the world, essentially. How has that sort of helped some of our, regional people in New South Wales or Australia in general? Like, have you seen or heard any feedback from remote users that, maybe they're dialing in via a 4G connection or something like that, and with the whole compression through like the web URL, like the HTML5 client, that kind of stuff, is there any sort of info that you can share from them if there's anybody that's come about or mentioned anything? Is there any sort of advantages for those guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a customer, they're regional, and when I say regional, they're country. There's not much out there. So they're not so much their experience has changed, but the IT support requirements for those environments have changed, right? The simplification of their network is disappeared. They've basically put just a standard internet connection. There's no MPLS network out there for them anymore. They're running thin clients, so there's no support challenges with those guys. They've basically got an internet connection, a thin client, a desktop, a keyboard, mouse, and that's about it. They've got a spare thin client in the cupboard in case that thin client broke. That's it. The management of that environment is next to nothing now because everything is up in the cloud. They want to update the endpoint or the virtual machine. They do it just like if they were in Sydney. So that distance barrier has gone away. So long as there is an internet connectivity, they're fine. Yeah. So
with AVD, Dave, they get that because AVD can cope with that full Microsoft synchronization. What I mean by that is OneDrive and Exchange and all that. They get and Teams, right? All that stuff. We can get like they get the same experience as if you're sat in an office in the city, right? We can give them that same experience wherever they are. And we've got clients that are, you know, well, as soon as they've got an NBN, like you say, just an NBN connection or even a Starlink or something like that, right? That just gives them that internet connectivity at a reasonable bandwidth, right? Then they're off and running, and we can give them like all of the corporate applications and all of the experience that you would get if you were sat in the CBD, which is fantastic. And again, Michelle, I can see you nodding. So you've obviously got some regional challenges with TAFE and some remote sites. You must have come across that as well. Right?
Yeah, I think the main one for us is with some of our satellite sites where they don't have on-prem infrastructure. So we use distribution points at every campus to deliver software and updates to our on-prem devices. So where we have satellite sites and they've got a 5G connection, they typically don't have, you know, there might be 4 users there, or, you know, not enough to justify putting infrastructure on-prem and having a distribution point there to rebuild devices or deliver software. So it really simplified things for us to say, well, if you log onto the virtual desktop, you'll get access to everything you need. And if something's not there, let us know and we'll add it in, or we'll create a bespoke pool to meet your requirements. So really simplified things in that respect.
Yeah, that's awesome. Be able to give that out in those areas, because it was, like you're saying, it's a massive challenge if you look at traditional approaches to doing that. Distribution points. I know I've a CCM administrator many years ago, and trying to get packages down to distribution points and out to PCs is hard work, right? And only on this sort of piece of string and to get there, right? So yeah, I bet that's a much better experience for the users.
That's actually, sorry, just to add on that, from my point, you know, we've got people, like you just said, Michelle, you got like say 4 or 5 people that are out there, and it really, you know, from a cost perspective, it's probably not worth it. You've got an alternative solution that's already in place and they can go ahead and log in. But, you know, just some of the stuff that Dave mentioned earlier around some of the MSIX app attach enhancements that are coming. If there is no software on those virtual desktops that's missing from particular users, you could probably target those people as a really good use case to look at packaging those applications that they need, and then giving them the ability to then streamline and run those applications. So, I mean, even though, you know, we're kind of moving these people from there into the cloud and then sort of giving them a solution where they can access machines, but they might not have the applications that they want, and then giving them the application that they need to stream via MSIX will then just simplify the whole thing for everybody, and then everybody will be happy, rather than putting in those, you know, 4 or 5 applications that the 4 or 5 people need into a host pool where 6,000 people are using it that might not need it. So then, you know, you've got the best of both worlds in that regard, which is really good.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to embracing some of the benefits of app attach. It'll simplify our management overhead as well. Instead of having multiple host pools for different purposes, just having 1 or 2 host pools and attaching the apps as the users connect in, and that's the app entitlement that they've got. So I think that'll be a much better experience for us from a management perspective, but also simplifies things for the end user. Here's a single host pool, log on, and you'll get the apps that you need based on what you're enrolled in.
Yeah. Yeah, just might do, guys, is refer the audience, if they don't know what app attach is or what the benefits are. We have there's a discussion series session on that. If you check our website out, and we'll send you the links to that post this. But yeah, we've delved into app attach and the benefits, and it's great to see some improvements coming in that space. Again, just got an eye on the time, guys, and I didn't want to obviously our welcome of our guests in there, but I might just get a final comment from around the table there. Start with maybe Dave. Do you want to go first, mate? Just give us a wrap up comment or anything that you want to point out before we close out.
Absolutely, guys. I want to thank you. Thank you for, obviously, CubeSys for putting this on. Michelle from TAFE New South Wales, thank you for being one of our favourite customers with a successful deployment. Guys, the VDI landscape has changed in the last 3 years, so it is an exciting time. I'm seeing more and more adoption of VDI. As Paul mentioned, I've been in the VDI space for a number of years now across multiple vendors. And you know, the year of the desktop has always been the year of the desktop for many years, but I think it's coming now. So you know, what we've got with consumption-based VDI these days is what we should have had, you know, 15 years ago. So it's now. It is exciting. If you're requiring features or you're requiring additional capability, just reach out. Paul and the team have got my details, and yeah, we'll work with you to make it happen.
Thanks, Dave, and I couldn't agree more. I think I'm a bit of an old warhorse like yourself, and been around the block. And VDI always had lots of promise, but there's always those problems at the back end with infrastructure and connectivity, and you know, a user performance being impacted, and that sort of stuff. And we've got so many great tools to address that now in the cloud. It really has been a big game changer over the last year or two. So fantastic, couldn't agree more. Michelle, got a last comment for us to wrap up?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say it certainly has been a game changer for us. And, you know, I've already mentioned a lot of the benefits that we've realized through it. I think one of the ones that I haven't mentioned is we're currently going through user acceptance testing to start running some of our CAD programs in Adobe Creative Cloud in AVD.
Yeah.
And that's to help us with some of our classrooms that are no longer up to spec. These applications change their spec requirements every year, and our aging classrooms sometimes don't keep up to date with them. So it gives us a plan B to redirect users into the virtual desktop and have that capability there with the GPU and being able to spec it as required. So certainly a game changer for us, and we continue to see new benefits that we can take advantage of, you know, pretty much every quarter.
I think, again, Michelle has nailed it there. And it's really surprising and maybe even shocking for me. I don't know, I've managed infrastructure for many years, and the last thing I wanted was engineers and their AutoCAD and SolidWorks and Adobe's on VDI. I was in no way do I want this. I can't cope with that. It's not going to work. It's going to be horrible, and you're going to complain lots. But absolutely the opposit with AVD and what we're able to do. And we've got clients doing that. We've got a lot of engineering companies now looking at getting rid of those big, beefy desktops under the desk that engineers had to run models or to run this heavy GPU intensive workloads, and AVD works beautifully for that. They're really good. So I think I couldn't agree more.
Look, the beauty in that is the hardware in Microsoft's data centers is changing constantly. Whereas you buy a high spec workstation and it's going to be there for 4 or 5 years. Whereas in an AVD, you can change the series that you're using at any time and redeploy, and you're taking advantage of the latest hardware. So it really does give you better capability in that respect.
Yeah, and like I said, the user experience is awesome on there, right? We've got some really great feedback about that, so that's good to know. And George, maybe wrap you up, and you've got a good example of that. I think in one of our other discussion series, running some high-end gaming, I think on a AVD platform. So if you don't believe if it works or not, check out that video with George just shows off his gaming skills. Right?
Yeah, I was playing Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think it's maybe time I should go and then deploy something else in there. Maybe put some Call of Duty and really run the graphics card quite intensely. But or maybe we could just run it like a gaming session, you know, AVD gaming session. Anyway, now look, honestly, from my point of view, like Paul said really early on, I've been across a lot of the deployments. You know, like we're coming up to 50, probably 60. I've lost count. That's how much we've done. If there's anything, or if you're thinking about moving to AVD, if you've got any weird educational use cases, anything like that, reach out. I'd love to hear it. I've no doubt we could probably sort the solution out for you or find an alternative. There is a lot of different ways that you can achieve the same thing in IT. Everybody knows that. So, you know, just come, reach out, share your ideas, let us know, and we'll try and onboard you and see what we can, what value we can provide.
Thanks, George. And yeah, again, a great comment, because I think having seen all those customers adopt AVD, it's been really surprising to see how many more use cases they've found within their business. I know we've got one particular government agency that's managed to find 14 different sort of requirements within their business, and we've got these 14 different images and different host pools to meet those particular requirements, right? So I think that once you adopt AVD, the flexibility of it to be able to answer other problems, it just becomes almost like that Swiss Army knife of solutions, right? You can just put it in to solve this problem, solve that business problem, give your users more access to things. So it's really, really encouraging to see that. Right? Okay, well, I think with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to our panel of speakers. Awesome to see your insights and share the details with us. And of course, we'll send out all the information back afterwards.